He got tired of his disabled child and pushed her down the staircase, but he never knew the CCTV caught him. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your country in the comments and hit that subscribe button to join the journey. What could drive a father to do something so heartless to his own child? Was it stress, anger, or was something darker like despair? Let me tell you how it all started. James, a 38-year-old black man, lived in a small apartment with his 10-year-old daughter, Lila. Lila was born with cerebral palsy, and her condition meant she used a wheelchair most of the time. James worked long hours at a warehouse, coming home exhausted, his hands rough from lifting boxes. Lila's care was a full-time job on top of that. Medications, therapy appointments, and constant attention. His wife, Sarah, had left 3 years ago, unable to handle the stress. James was alone, and the weight was crushing him. "Daddy, can you help me with my book?" Lila asked one evening, her voice soft. She sat in her wheelchair by the living room table, a picture book open in front of her. Her hands struggled to turn the pages. James sighed, rubbing his face. "Lila, I just got home. Can't you wait a minute?" His voice was sharp, louder than he meant. Lila's face fell. "Sorry, Daddy." He felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it down. "It's fine. Just let me eat first." He microwaved a frozen dinner and sat on the couch, staring at the TV. The news droned on, but his mind was elsewhere. Bills were piling up. Lila's new wheelchair cost more than he could afford, and the insurance barely covered half. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Daddy, the book?" Lila asked again, her eyes hopeful. "Enough, Lila," he snapped. "I'm tired, okay? I can't do everything." He stood up, his plate clattering to the floor. Lila flinched, and James hated himself for it. "I'm sorry, baby," he muttered, walking over to help her. But inside, something was breaking. Every day felt like a fight he couldn't win. At work the next day, his boss pulled him aside. "James, you're late again, and you look like you haven't slept in a month. Get it together, or you're out." "I'm trying, man," James said, his voice low. "It's hard at home. Everybody's got problems," his boss replied. "Don't bring yours here." That night, James sat at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. Lila was in her room, humming to herself. The sound, usually sweet, grated on his nerves. He poured a glass of whiskey, then another. "Why me?" he muttered. "Why do I have to deal with this?" He loved Lila, but the thought crept in, life would be easier without her. The next morning, Lila spilled her juice at breakfast. "Oops," she giggled, trying to wipe it with her sleeve. James slammed his hand on the table. "Can't you do anything right?" he yelled. Lila's smile vanished. He stormed out of the kitchen, his heart racing. He didn't mean to shout, but the anger was spilling over. He felt trapped, like a man drowning in his own life. That evening, he called his sister, Maya. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice shaking. "Lila needs so much, and I'm falling apart." "James, you need help?" Maya said. "Get a caregiver, or let me take her for a bit." "I don't need charity," he snapped. "I'm her father. I'll handle it." But he wasn't handling it. The next day, Lila's therapist called. "She missed her session again, James. This is important for her progress." "I know," he shouted into the phone. "I'm doing my best." He hung up, his hands trembling. Lila was in the living room, struggling to reach a toy on the floor. "Daddy, can you—" "No," he cut her off. "Figure it out, Lila." He walked away, his chest tight. He didn't see the hurt in her eyes. That night, he drank again. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in. Lila's wheelchair was by the staircase, where he'd carried her up to her room earlier. He stared at it, his mind dark. If she was gone, he whispered to himself, then stopped. He shook his head, horrified at the thought, but it lingered. It was a Tuesday evening, and James was at his limit. Lila had a bad day. Her muscles were stiff, and she cried during her bath. "It hurts, Daddy," she whimpered as he helped her into bed. "I know, baby," he said, but his voice was flat. He was exhausted, his patience gone. After tucking her in, he went downstairs and poured another drink. The TV was on, but he didn't hear it. His mind was a storm. Anger, guilt, and desperation swirling together. Around midnight, Lila called out, "Daddy, I need water." James froze, his glass halfway to his lips. "Can't you just sleep?" he muttered under his breath. He climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Lila was sitting up in bed, her small face pale in the dim light. "Here," he said, handing her a glass. His hands shook as he set it down. "Go to sleep, Lila." "Daddy, are you mad at me?" she asked, her voice small. He didn't answer. He turned and walked out, closing her door. But as he stood at the top of the staircase, something snapped. The weight of years, sleepless nights, endless bills, the loneliness crashed down. He went back to her room, his heart pounding. "Lila, let's go downstairs," he said, his voice strange even to himself. He lifted her from bed and placed her in her wheelchair. She looked confused but didn't argue. He wheeled her to the staircase, his hands gripping the handles tightly. "Daddy, what are we doing?" Lila asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. His mind was blank, like a switch had flipped. He stopped at the edge of the stairs. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the fridge downstairs. He looked at Lila, her small body in the chair, and then at the staircase. It was steep, narrow. His hands moved before his brain could catch up. "I'm sorry," he whispered and pushed. Lila screamed as the wheelchair tipped forward. It clattered down the stairs, the sound echoing in the dark. She hit the bottom, her cries stopping abruptly. James stood frozen, his breath ragged. "Oh God, what did I do?" he whispered. He ran down the stairs, his heart in his throat. Lila was crumpled on the floor, her wheelchair tipped over. She was breathing, but barely. Panic hit him. He grabbed his phone, then stopped. What if they find out? He thought of the police, the questions. No one saw, he told himself. He lifted Lila, wincing at her stillness, and carried her back to her room. "You fell," he whispered, as if convincing himself. It was an accident. He cleaned the scene, riding the wheelchair, wiping the floor. His hands shook the whole time. He didn't sleep that night, sitting by Lila's bed, watching her chest rise and fall. She was alive, but her arm looked wrong, maybe broken. "I'll take her to the hospital tomorrow," he told himself. "I'll say she fell." But upstairs in the hallway, a small red light blinked. The apartment's old CCTV camera, installed by the landlord after a break-in last year, had recorded everything. James didn't know it was there. The next morning, James took Lila to the hospital. She fell down the stairs. He told the doctor, his voice steady but his eyes darting. Lila was quiet, her arm in a sling, her face bruised. The doctor nodded, but looked at James for a second too long. "She's lucky it wasn't worse," the doctor said. "We'll need to keep her for observation." James nodded, his stomach twisting. "Can I stay with her?" "Of course," the doctor said, but his tone was cold. James sat by Lila's bed, holding her hand. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered when no one was around. Lila didn't answer. She just stared at the ceiling. Back at the apartment, the landlord, Mr. Chun, was checking the CCTV footage. A neighbor had reported hearing a scream the night before. Mr. Chun frowned as he watched the grainy video. There was James pushing Lila's wheelchair down the stairs. His hands froze on the keyboard. "Oh my God," he muttered. He called the police. That afternoon, 2 officers knocked on James's door. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk," one said, holding tablet. James's heart sank. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice tight. "We have footage," the officer said, "from your building's CCTV. You want to explain why you pushed your daughter down the stairs?" James's mouth went dry. It was an accident," he stammered. "She fell." "We saw the tape, Mr. Carter," the other officer said. "It wasn't an accident." James's legs gave out, and he sank onto the couch. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said, his voice breaking. "I was tired. I couldn't take it anymore." The officers didn't respond. They read him his rights and cuffed him. At the station, James sat in a cold room, staring at the table. His sister, Maya, came to see him. "How could you?" she screamed through tears. "She's your daughter." "I know," James whispered. "I messed up, Maya. I was drowning." "You don't get to make excuses," she shouted. "Lila trusted you." Lila stayed in the hospital, her injuries healing slowly. Maya took custody, vowing to protect her. James faced charges of child abuse and attempted murder. The CCTV footage was played in court, and the jury gasped as they watched. James didn't look up. He knew what he'd done. In his cell, James thought about Lila every day. He wrote her letters she'd never read, begging for forgiveness. But the guilt was his punishment, heavier than any sentence. Lila, with Maya's help, started to smile again, but James would carry the weight of that night forever.